Hello and welcome to the Capitola Planning Commission meeting. This meeting is open to the public with in-person attendance at the City of Capitola Council Chambers at 420 Capitola Avenue, and remote viewing is also possible. The Planning Commission and staff are attending in person, and members of the public wanting to offer public comment need to be present. The public can live stream the meeting from the city's website, on YouTube, or on Zoom following the link in the meeting agenda. As always, this meeting is cablecast live on Spectrum Communication Cable TV Channel 8 and AT&T Uverse Channel 99, and is being recorded to be rebroadcast on the following Mondays and Fridays at 1 p.m. on Spectrum Channel 71 and Spectrum Channel 25. A recording of the meeting will also be available on the city's website after the meeting. Our technician tonight is, I didn't catch his name. What was the technician's? Brian, thank you. As a reminder, please turn off all cell phones during the meeting. Item 1, we're going to do roll call.
Commissioner Esty?
Here.
Commissioner Howard?
Here.
Commissioner Welch?
Here.
Vice Chair Q?
Here.
Chair Christensen?
Here. All right, and then the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Item 2 is additions and deletions to the agenda. We have one item, item A.
Staff received additional materials for tonight's agenda, 3 emails and 1 staff memorandum for item 6A. All have been included in the agenda packet.
Thank you. Item 3 is oral communications. Oral communications allows time for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on any consent item on tonight's agenda or on any topic within the jurisdiction of the city that is not on the public hearing section of the agenda. Members of the public may speak for up to 3 minutes unless otherwise specified by the chair. Individuals may not speak for more than once during the oral communications. All speakers must address the entire legislative body and will not be permitted to engage in dialogue. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Goran Klapic. I'm former security guard of Zelda's on the beach. During that time when I faithfully executed this position with my black brother George at the front door, I encountered something that there was some cocaine trafficking going on in the city of Capitola. At the moment, I'm involved in maybe future lawsuits, maybe even against the state of California, because I have a little beef going on with Gavin Newsom. I did not vote for him, you know. So when we are talking about cocaine trafficking, that's a sophisticated operation. It's coming from the southern border, Los Angeles and San Diego area, and going north to San Francisco or San Jose area trafficked. So what I'm saying is I spoke about that before with a great chief who was here before, Sarah Ryan. His name was Andrew Daly. He was a great person. He arrested one time somebody who I mentioned to him. He knew exactly who I was talking about. It was a black, large individual who was trafficking major cocaine in the city of Capitola and village of Capitola. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you.
Thank you.
Terry Thomas. I would like the city to reconsider using flock cameras because we don't know where the information that gets out onto the internet ends up being used. And because it's such a new organization, there's no way to control how the information is used in the future.
My name is Katie Guernsey, and I sent a letter via email, and I'd like to read it aloud now regarding the Capitola Mall project.
This is, this is for oral communications. If you have something pertaining to an agenda item, we have a public hearing.
Oh, would you like me to speak under number 6? Thank you.
Anybody else would like to speak about anything not on tonight's agenda? Okay, moving on. Item 4 is Planning Commission and staff comments. Do you have anything?
No comments this evening.
Okay. Moving on to the consent calendar. Item 5, all matters listed under the consent calendar are considered by the Planning Commission to be routine and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. There will be no separate discussion on these items prior to the time the Planning Commission votes on the action unless the Planning Commission requests specific items to be discussed for separate review. Items pulled for separate discussion will be considered in the order listed on the agenda. We have one item, the approval of the January 15, 2026 Planning Commission minutes. We have a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Moving on. Moving on to item 6 with the public hearing. Public hearings are intended to provide an opportunity for public discussion of each item listed as a public hearing. The following procedure is as follows. First, the staff presentation. Second, the Planning Commission questions. Third, public comment. Fourth, the Planning Commission deliberation. And 5 is decision. We have one item. Item A is Capitola Mall Zone Code Amendments for Housing Implementation.
Thank you, Chair Christensen, and good evening, Planning Commission. Before you tonight is the Capitola Mall zoning code updates. And tonight we'll all be presenting within this presentation. To the right of me is Eric Phillips with our City Attorney's Office and Ben Noble, our consultant, who's been writing the document. And then via Zoom, we have our representatives from Kaiser Marston and Associates, Kevin and Ryan, and I'll introduce you once we get to those slides. So with that, and also Ryan Call from Urban Fields. So thank you. So jumping in, next slide, please. I'm going to give some background to how we got to where we are and what we are working on, and then Eric will jump in next with some comments. So background, there's been long-range planning efforts on the mall for a very long time, but most recently since 2011, when we updated our general plan and also did a 41st Avenue and Capitola Mall revisioning plan, the general plan updates, and then most recently, 2024, the housing element updates. Next slide. Within the zoning code updates, a number of things have happened to assist in mall redevelopment. First, we've reduced parking and allowed mixed use in 2010. Following our adoption of our general plan, we adopted community benefits section to increase the height of the mall to 50 feet and the floor area ratio to allow more square footage on the site. In 2018, there were further updates to allow vertical and horizontal mixed use and decreasing parking. Back in 2022, we adopted objective standards for multifamily and mixed use. And then in 2024, we did a complete revision of all sections of our code to remove barriers to housing, and that included updates to the regional commercial district. Next slide. So what is a housing element? It's a long-range planning document, and it focuses on the housing needs of the city, identifies the housing needs. We also identify constraints that exist within our zoning code and policies, and then we drafted new goals, policies, and objectives to say how we're going to overcome those constraints and meet those needs. There are draft housing programs within the housing element, as well as a sites inventory showing where future housing can be produced. And if we go to the next slide, the housing programs that we're focused on tonight are programs 1.6 and 1.7. This slide is probably one of the most important slides. This is why we're here tonight. This is why we are updating our zoning code currently. And this is a requirement of the state. Our housing element has to be certified by the state. And every year in April, we submit our annual update to say that we're in compliance with the state and the goals and policies that have been set. So program 1.6 and 1.7 is focused on the mall, and it establishes the mall block as the mall properties to allow heights up to 75 feet for mall redevelopment. Mall redevelopment is defined as mixed use, retail and commercial and residential. We also committed to excluding parking garages from your floor area calculation, which is the overall square footage of the site, and then to adopt objective development standards to facilitate mall redevelopment. So that's what we're up to, and the implementation of this, we've been working hard at it, and tonight that will be the topic of discussion. Next slide. So this is just a simple slide showing the Capitola Mall properties. Next slide. So what have we done to date? We started this process in October with a work session. We held a community meeting at New Brighton that was really successful on October 8th. During October and November, we met with multiple stakeholders, and we continue to meet with stakeholders throughout the process. October 30th, and November 19th, we had work sessions at Planning Commission with public comment. Then November 19th, we had a partial draft ready for the new development standards tied to these the updates. And then December 4th was the first full draft that the Planning Commission saw. And then February 5th, tonight, is the second time we've seen a full draft of the updates. Next slide, please. So for those in the audience that aren't, to educate on what an objective standard is, it's a standard to review a development project in which we can't utilize our personal or subjective judgment. There have to be clear and measurable rules. So building height, limits, setbacks, design features, open space, landscaping. And the purpose of this is so when a developer comes in with a project, they know exactly what the city is looking for and there's certainty in the review. Next slide. So an example of a subjective comment when it comes to design is that the new development must complement the neighborhood's architectural style. That's a hard thing to gauge as a planning commissioner, whether or not a certain look or feel fits within a neighborhood's architectural style. The more objective standard is just outlining what a building entryway should look like with either a recess of 5 feet from the front facade of the building. It's something that you can measure and define. Next slide. So under today's code, the development in the Capitola Mall would be reviewed under the 4 chapters I have listed on the slide. And if you could press forward. As we're adopting new zoning code standards, there's some of the new code standards that are in there will affect our industrial, as well as we're expanding the objective standards to apply not only to the mixed use areas that they apply to today, but also extending them into the central village and the industrial areas, just in case we were to get an application that needed to be reviewed against objective standards. The village being within the coastal zone, we've received comments of concern of that holding up the mall in terms of these changes, and that it'll take a separate track. Once approved by the city council, all areas outside the coastal zone will be in effect in terms of the zoning code, and there'll be separate chapters that will have to wait for the certification by the Coastal Commission. So I just want to clarify that this will not hold up, that change will not hold up this process by any means from all properties. Next slide, please. So another floor area ratio is the there's typically a maximum floor area ratio that you can achieve, and that's based on the gross building square footage that's permitted on a lot relative to the gross square footage of the lot. So for a 1.0, you would be able to have 1 square foot of building for each square foot of land. Next slide. So Planning Commission meeting on December 4th. We reviewed the draft code and brought you up to date with the new standards. We also, on the 4th, received comments from Merlone Geyer Partners, the majority property owner of the mall, outlining items within those the first 2 chapters that they'd like to see addressed, making suggestions towards the objective standards and also the review criteria. The direction from the Planning Commission that night was to revise the draft, considering the Planning Commission direction and also Merlone Geyer's input. And the Planning Commission suggested including a tier 3 to the code, and then also to come back with our complete economic analysis. So next slide. And so since that meeting, we have had ongoing stakeholder meetings and talking with Merlone Geyer. Following that meeting, we met with them and went through their attachment that they had sent with all their comments and went through them one by one. Many of those design suggestions we've incorporated into the document. There are a few that were not incorporated, specifically anything related to a policy. There was a suggestion of decreasing the commercial to requirement to 25,000 square feet and the open space requirement to count towards open space down to 1,000 square feet. And those have not, anything policy-wise, we did not change, but many of the suggestions have been implemented. Next slide. And also on January 7th, I met with the State of California Department of Housing and Community Development. Within our housing element, we were, our goal was to have this completed by the end of 2025. And now that we're in 2026, I sat down, I did a Zoom call and brought them up to date with where we are. And they said, as long as you're continuing to work actively on this project and working in conjunction with Merlone Geyer, they do not have any issues with the timing, just they want to see continued progress. And they're supportive of our collaboration. And with that, I'll hand the presentation over to Eric Phillips.
And so the comments that Director Hurley just shared provided some background for the types of changes that were in the updated zoning code and the staff report that was published last week. And then I wanted to drill down on a couple of changes and provide the context for the further amendments that were made in the supplemental memo that came out after the staff report. So as staff was working on the updated draft to incorporate your direction and the comments that Director Hurley just summarized, the city did receive a communication from HCD that included a technical assistance request that a member of the public had submitted. And I'll go through what that means in the context of HCD's process and their enforcement in just a moment. But what we did in response was the city staff team met with HCD to discuss and walk through the comments that were in the technical assistance request, see where HCD might have comments or further questions or further direction. After some back and forth, HCD then provided written guidance on January 30th, the same day that the packet was published. But after we had a chance to review and internalize their comments on February 3rd, we published a supplement to the staff report with some additional changes. And we go to the next slide. I'll go through those in a little bit more detail. So the technical advisory letter that kicked off the conversation with HCD was actually pretty broad. It covered lots of different topics and aspects of the zoning code update. But based on the conversation with HCD and after answering a couple of their questions, it was clear there were only 3 topics that HCD staff were actually interested in pursuing or wanted to provide additional direction for staff recommendation and for your consideration. And they're summarized here. They primarily were focused around the conditional use permit process, the section of the Objective Design Standards Code that allows for discretionary deviations from standards, and the scope of the fiscal impact assessment. So I'll go through each of those in a little bit more detail and explain what the areas of controversy and the responses have been. But I did want to let everyone know that outside of these three topics, our conversation with the HCD staff, they seemed very comfortable with the direction that the ordinance was going, notwithstanding other comments that might have been brought to their attention. Next slide. So to go through those in order, the conditional use permit discussion, part of the housing element program that was featured in the first part of the presentation was to facilitate and housing production on the mall site and to increase the level of certainty that an applicant would have that if they meet city standards, they'll be able to move through the process and get to project approval. Notwithstanding that, because this site is so large, it will really function as a master plan development, needs new open spaces, new interior circulation systems. The city still is interested in having a conditional use permit process to make sure that the overall site is developed in a cohesive way and a way that internally makes sense. But to try and balance those two competing objectives, HCD provided direction to the city to try and articulate some limitations on the amount of discretion that would be associated with the conditional use process. In some other jurisdictions, there are minor use permits or development review permits that could kind of serve a similar purpose, but we didn't have it in a directly analogous permit process here in Capitola. So instead, we articulated the specific features that are related to future development that would be available for consideration in connection with the conditional use permit, while introducing some code amendments to make it clear that the policy decision to have housing on the site has already been made, and that the question of whether or not residential or mixed use could be introduced to the site has basically been asked and answered. That's not something that will be up for consideration the way that it might be through a traditional conditional use permit process. And so we have the factors that the use permit process would consider here. And in early discussions, we have not had a formal review with HCD after introducing these additional changes to the draft, but our initial conversation with staff suggests that this is an approach that they will be comfortable with. Next slide. The second area where we made further changes was there's a section of the Objective Development Standards Code which specifies that there is a discretionary review process to deviate from the objective development standards, because we recognize that a project might not be able to comply with every prescribed standard that you all are reviewing and recommending. So you have another opportunity to look at it in context in connection with a specific development application. But HCD was expressed concern with this provision that it could be, the way that we had drafted it originally, they were concerned that it could be interpreted in a way that would preclude using density bonus or conflict with provisions of state law that clarify that if you're using a density bonus, you are still eligible for other state streamlining tools. So we introduced additional language here to clarify the intent. And just to summarize what the changes are doing here is that it makes it clear that an applicant has the opportunity to come back to the Planning Commission to ask for deviations from these objective development standards. But doing that means that it is not consistent with the objective development standards. So to the extent that that's a prerequisite for using different state streamlining tools, those tools would not be available. However, we did also make clear that that process is separate from the density bonus process. The applicant still has the right to request waivers, concessions, that are independent from this process under the density bonus, and the use of the density bonus process does not affect their eligibility for those other state programs. So just to try and clarify all that. And then next. And then the third and final change that we introduced in response to the HCD comments was a comment in response to the scope of the fiscal impact assessment. HCD staff did express some concern that the fiscal impact assessment could be used as an improper basis to deny a future housing development project or create a burden in connection with the application for a housing development project. And to the extent that creating the fiscal impact assessment would put an additional financial burden on a 100% affordable housing project, I think staff agreed with that. We were willing to recommend an exception for a 100% affordable project to avoid creating a burden for them through the application process, exempt them from the fiscal impact assessment. However, HCD, they liked that recommendation, but they also suggested that we take that further and exempt all housing development projects from the fiscal impact assessment. And notwithstanding HCD's comment, staff is not currently recommending going quite that far. Part of the purpose of the fiscal impact assessment is really to inform you or the future you and future bodies about the direct impacts of a new housing development project. And again, not so that you can deny that housing development project, but so that you can be informed about those impacts and make decisions about maybe what other planning changes should occur elsewhere in Capitola. So we did further revise this language to try and make it very clear that the fiscal impact assessment would be used for informational purposes. It will guide those future land use decisions, but it is not to be used as a basis to deny or reduce the density of a housing development project. That's consistent with what we'd been presenting to you all along of the purpose of that study, but to avoid future confusion, we did try and make that even more expressly clear in the code itself. Next slide. And then I apologize, this looks a little bit like an eye chart, but what it actually is a flow chart from the state's website about HCD's technical guidance and compliance and enforcement process. And what it shows is how early we are in the process with HCD. Although you probably can't read it, at the very top level that is when they receive a request. That initiates their process to meet with staff, provide technical guidance, have conversations with staff about what the project is and how we're planning to approach it. That's that second bar on the chart, and that's the stage where we are right now. We've had those initial conversations with HCD, and if they're satisfied with the results and the changes that we make to the code before the code gets adopted, the process is actually going to end there. We're not even going to move further through the flow chart. However, there will be other opportunities. If HCD is not satisfied with the direction that the city is going, they can provide additional technical assistance. And eventually, because this is a housing element related matter, they can send a notice of inquiry or a notice of potential violation if they think that the city is not fairly implementing its housing element policies. Again, we're hopeful that the changes we're recommending tonight will keep us out of that process, but we'll get warning if HCD disagrees. Then we'll have another opportunity to make further refinements, continue to go back and forth. Eventually, they do have the opportunity to send an actual notice of violation. They can begin proceedings to revoke housing element compliance or refer enforcement to the Attorney General's office. And those are all things that we don't anticipate coming from this conversation. Every conversation we've had with staff so far has been very collaborative. We're looking to take their guidance and incorporate it. So we'll continue with that process, but we just wanted you to be aware of where it could go if the changes aren't deemed sufficient in further conversations with HCD. We can go next slide, and I'll pass the mic over.
So I'm going to very briefly summarize the proposed amendments before you tonight and highlight the changes to those amendments since you last reviewed them. So there are two main parts to the Capitola Mall zoning code amendments. There's a new section in 1724 that outlines the development standards and land use regulations that apply to the Capitola Mall property, as well as a few other amendments to other existing zoning code chapters. And there's also a new chapter, 1757, that contains the new objective design standards for Capitola Mall redevelopment. And as Director Hurley described earlier, these amendments are to implement the housing element, and specifically programs 1.6 and 1.7. And it does that by removing the Capitola Mall property from the existing Chapter 1788, which was a discretionary process to allow for increased FAR and height on the Capitola Mall property, and to replace that with new objective standards so that those development rights could be obtained through a more streamlined process. And it establishes a new three-tier system to support the redevelopment of the Capitola Mall in a way that incentivizes housing, retail, and hotel on the site consistent with general plan policies. So in the amendments before you tonight, for Capitola Mall redevelopment, there's a three-tier system. Tier 1 is for projects that are housing only and would require 20% affordability consistent with housing element program requirements. The Tier 2 would encourage a mixed-use project with the same affordable housing component, but with a hotel with at least 85 rooms, 3,500 square feet of meeting space, and 40,000 square feet of new commercial space. And based on direction from the Planning Commission at the December 4th meeting, we've introduced to the amendments a Tier 3, which would give a applicant the option to include a larger hotel with up to 120, with at least 125 rooms, 5,000 square feet of meeting space, and 40,000 square feet of commercial, or to incorporate a substantial amount of new commercial space, 200,000 square feet, based on the discussion at the Planning Commission meeting on December 4th. I'll emphasize that these are all options that would be available to a developer on the Capitola Mall site, and the intent is to incentivize a mixed-use project with features desired by the community. So now I'll go into a little more detail about some of the amendments or some of the revisions to the amendments since the Planning Commission last reviewed them. So one thing I'll note early on is that there was a discussion at the December 4th meeting about for the new Tier 3 pathway to require that the affordable units be available only to seniors. Staff's recommendation is to not include that requirement in order to avoid creating a new constraint to housing production, as well as to comply with state and federal fair housing laws. So as I mentioned previously, the housing development on the Capitola Mall site would need to comply with the affordable housing requirement described in the housing element. And so some revisions have been included in the amendments that clarify that development projects on the mall property would need to comply with the city's existing inclusionary ordinance with two exceptions. The projects would need to meet the 20% affordability requirement. And for both rental and ownership projects, in lieu fees would not be permitted. And the affordable units would need to be provided on site or through land dedication to the city or a city-approved developer. So then other than those differences, all other existing requirements in the inclusionary ordinance would apply to Capitola Mall projects. So a number of other changes to Section 1724.035 include new rules for calculating density, requiring parking spaces for project residents to be in a parking structure, for Tier 2 and Tier 3 projects to exclude rooftop decks from the floor area calculation, and to allow building infrastructure to project above the maximum height within the entire building footprint. So now moving on to the objective design standards, the new chapter in the zoning code that would apply to all development on the mall block. As I mentioned previously, this replaces the existing objective design standards that were written for citywide application so that the standards better address the unique design considerations for a mixed-use mall redevelopment project. And these standards address the issues that are most important to the type and scale of development that we're expecting on the mall property, including both site and building design standards. So at the December 4th Planning Commission meeting, there was some specific direction from the Planning Commission on the objective design standards. We've incorporated those into the revised draft. Includes reducing the pedestrian clear path in street frontages to 6 feet, identifying rooftop open space as a permitted type of publicly accessible open space, as well as narrowing the required unique facade identities widths and aligning those better with the massing break standard. Also, in response to Planning Commission direction, we've reduced the ground floor transparency for residential uses. We eliminated the required 2-foot elevation for ground floor residential uses, and we've increased the flexibility in design requirements for hotel development. There were a number of other revisions that came out of staff's conversations with Merlone Geyer, as well as continued review of the draft amendments. We reorganized the street frontage improvement section, so you see a lot of red lines for that section. That's largely a result of the reorganization that occurred. We've added the statement that new internal streets must be privately owned and maintained. We've also clarified exactly when street frontage improvements are required. We've allowed deviation from street frontage dimensions in some unique circumstances. We've added maintenance agreement requirements for privately owned streetscape and open space improvements, clarified rules for calculating publicly accessible open space, as well as increased the minimum paseo width that's required to use such a feature towards the minimum publicly accessible open space requirement. We've added standards for service parking lot location adjacent to internal streets. We've reduced the ground level commercial transparency requirement for secondary building facades. And as I mentioned previously, we replaced previous hotel design standards with a new requirement that at least one hotel building facade needs to face a street with no surface parking located between this facade and the sidewalk. So that's a summary of the changes to the amendments since they last went before the Planning Commission. And in the staff report, we highlighted 2 items for policy discussion and direction from the Planning Commission. Those 2 are the minimum size of publicly accessible open space in order to count towards the open space area requirement, and then some of the specific square footage requirements that are associated with the 3 proposed tiers. So I'm going to speak briefly about the open space issue, and then I'm going to hand off the presentation to Kaiser Marson to talk a little bit more about the economic study, as well as how that relates to the redevelopment tier numbers. So in the December draft, there was a requirement for a minimum area of 3,000 square feet for a publicly accessible open space to count towards the total amount of required open space. A project could include publicly accessible open space areas that are smaller than that minimum 3,000 square feet. That wouldn't be disallowed. But in order to count towards the total required amount of publicly accessible open space, it would need to be at least 3,000 square feet. And so Merlot Geyer requested reducing that to 1,000 square feet. City staff discussed that with Merlot Geyer, considered the amendment, and we did not make a change to that in the draft amendments, but instead highlighted it for the Planning Commission's consideration. We also put together an attachment with examples of publicly accessible open space at a range of sizes. And we're seeking your direction on the minimum size to count towards the open space requirement. I think staff's recommendation on this is to maintain the 3,000 square feet, given that this area is intended to serve as publicly accessible and usable open space that can function as a gathering place for the public to use and enjoy. And we think that at least 3,000 square feet is the appropriate minimum for that. So just what's shown in the attachment in the staff report with some examples that we're all familiar with. This area on Way is about 1,300 square feet. You may be familiar with the World War Memorial Plaza in Santa Cruz at the intersection of Front and Pacific Avenue. The entire area, including the landscaped area, is about 2,500 square feet measured to the curb. So here in Capitola, for the Esplanade Park, the entire area of shown outlined in red is a little over 9,000 square feet. And for a sense of what 1,000 square feet feels like, that little area outside of Britannia Arms, adjacent to the walkway, that's about 1,000 square feet in size, to give you a sense of that. Abbott Square in Santa Cruz, excluding the octagonal building, is about 6,000 square feet. And then the Aptos New Leaf open space, that comes in at about 14,000 square feet. And these are images that you saw at your last meeting as well. And another image that we looked at in December was the Valencia Park, Santana Row open space that comes in at about 15,000 square feet, excluding the retail kiosks, but including the outdoor dining area. So as I mentioned previously, our recommendation is to maintain the 3,000 square feet minimum size to count towards the open space requirement. As I said previously, an applicant can include publicly accessible open space areas that are less than 3,000, but in order to meet the total minimum area requirement, it would need to be at least 3,000 square feet. And there was one correction that we need to include in this as well. In the section referenced in the slide, the reference to plazas, parks, and other open spaces should be updated from public to publicly accessible. All of these spaces are intended to be privately owned and maintained, not city-owned and maintained. So with that, I'm going to hand over the presentation to our economists at Kaiser Marston.
Hello, I'm Kevin Ekstrom. I'm a partner at Kaiser Marston Associates, and we are a economic and financial consulting firm that works primarily with the public agencies. I'd say about 98%, 99% of the work that we do is for cities, counties, universities, and the like. And for these public agencies and institutions, the work that we do is essentially focused on land use economics, whether it's fiscal impact studies, market studies, financial feasibility analyses, affordable housing, kind of the depth and breadth of all different types of land uses, whether it's residential, commercial, office, industrial, et cetera, but also the economics of that and how it informs decisions that are made by policymakers and by cities to best position their cities for success now and into the future. I'm joined here tonight by Ryan Koyanagi, who I'll let him introduce himself, and he's going to walk through the presentation that we have for you.
Yes, hi. So I'm Ryan Konard from Kaiser Marston, and let me get this presentation set up properly. So this is a truncated version of the longer report that the Planning Commission would have already received. So a couple key things we want to highlight here in our key findings is we looked primarily at national data brokers, places like CoStar or Esri or Claritas for this information. So the study areas that we're looking at are going to include some jurisdictions that are not directly comparable to the mall site, but these are data sources and study areas that are used as a standard by large national real estate firms. So that's the type of data we wanted to use because it matches those decision-making processes. So for the retail area that we're looking at this area shown on the map here of this area between roughly Live Oak and Aptos. One thing that we wanted to highlight is in the city, we have a very large employment sector of people in the retail trade and leisure and hospitality sectors. And that's really important because that feeds into those two main opportunities that we're looking at for the site. So the local market area has among the highest retail leases in the county. And you also see the highest retail sale prices in the county. So it's a very healthy market overall. And when we look at the rate of new retail development and retail leasing in the area, we see two interesting developments in the last couple of years. And one of those is since the COVID pandemic, we've had a lot of tenants giving up space. We have had a lot of retail square footage being taken off the market. And that's reversed in that last year in 2025, where we've had a couple really big lease ups. But this isn't projected to extend so boisterously into the future. It does even out a little bit as we project out to 2029. One of the big analyses we did here was a retail surplus and leakage analysis. And what this is we compare the anticipated retail sales of all the different retail establishments within the study area and compare that against the anticipated spending of the residents in that area. So the areas we're using are a 1, 3, and 5 mile radius around this mall redevelopment site. So when those retail sales of the, when the retail spending, let me reverse that. When the retail sales of that, of those establishments within the area are greater than the anticipated spending of the residents within that area, we have a retail surplus. So that means that you have customers coming into those areas to make purchases within those retail categories. The reverse of that is a retail leakage, then that's when there is more spending by those residents than there are sales by the retail establishments within that area. So that means that that customer demand is not being met within the study area and people are making those purchases outside of the areas that are being studied. So that does indicate that there may be market demand for retail establishments within those categories. Now, that being said, a retail surplus does not mean that there is no demand. Especially what we see here is there are very high surpluses in food service, and that is restaurants and food and beverage, which are grocery stores. And we see that in the 1, 3, and 5 mile radius. So this means that people within the region are coming into this area to do their dining and their food shopping. So that is also indicative of the type of demand as well. When we take the retail leakage, what we can do is we can divide that against typical sales per square foot for different retail categories to get an estimate of potential retail space demand. And one of the things we do see, especially at that 3 mile market area, is there's a very high demand for general merchandise stores. And these are things like your Targets, your Walmarts, Costco's. We do see at the 5 mile radius that demand's fully satisfied because there is a Costco on Sylvania Avenue over in Santa Cruz. That's only about 3.7 miles away. But you do see that there are an additional 4 retail categories here where there is potential market demand. The next analysis we did, we talked to real estate professionals that are active in the area. This includes retail brokers, developers, property owners. And this is so we can get more qualitative insight into the commercial opportunities in the area. And we can use that to augment that quantitative data that we were using from those national brokers. And one of the things that we're seeing is the site is, the brokers agree, is very well suited for redevelopment. There are a couple challenges, and one of those is there is that mismatch between market demand for retail compared to the financial feasibility of that retail. We're looking at a landscape where there is a lot more rising costs in terms of financing, labor, materials. That may make it a little bit more challenging to make that retail space make money. And the other thing is, even though the city of Capitola is making among the highest retail rents in the region, this is still about $1 less than what people are seeing for retail rents up in the San Francisco Bay Area. So national developers are going to be comparatively looking for different spaces, unfortunately. So the spaces that make the most sense here are going to be food service, like we saw on that previous chart. This is a very prime area for dining, and this can be tailored to fit the new residential developments. So this can look anything like small quick serve restaurants. You think your Chipotle's, your Cavas, your Sweet Green, maybe small cafes with outdoor seating that will blend well into the new urban fabric being developed here. Or it could be something larger, such as a food hall. That could be either indoor or outdoor, serving food trucks or serving smaller spaces that could be amenable for local and regional entrepreneurs instead. Now, brokers do agree that there is a lot of interest, especially in mixed-use residential and hotel in this area. That influx of new residents will especially help bolster the performance of retail both at the site and across the local market area, and the hotel will have that same effect as well. So when we're looking at the hotel analysis, we're looking primarily at this predefined submarket area of coastal Santa Cruz County going up through Scotts Valley, and we're comparing that to this greater San Jose market area. Now, when we're doing hotel analyses, we are looking primarily at 3 key performance indicators. The first is occupancy. The second is ADR, or average daily rate. This is how much the average price that a guest will pay per night for a hotel room. And the third is revenue per available room. We find that by multiplying the average daily rate by occupancy as a shorthand, this is something comparable to how much a hotel is making per room. And you can see in all three of these key performance indicators that the local submarket is outperforming that greater San Jose market. When we're considering what types of hotels come in, we're looking primarily at hotels in that upscale and upper mid-scale range. Those are going to be things like your Hiltons, your Marriotts, the Fairfield Inn and Suites, for example. These all have different amounts of event space typically associated with them. And you'll see as you go up the scale, you're going to have more event space, and it's going to be higher quality event space with more purpose-built amenities. So with that in mind, the key findings that we're looking at here for the space is a new retail demand of between 25,000 and 35,000 square feet. And for the hotels, we're looking at either that 85 or that 125 to 130 room hotel is going to be looking at about 25 to 30 square feet of meeting space per room. So that would translate to about 2,500 square feet to 3,900 square feet of meeting space in each of those hotels. Let me stop that screen share there.
Thank you, Ryan and Kevin. Great presentation. From there, I'll pick it up for the last item for the Planning Commission before we go to questions. So next, we're going to talk about the 3 tiers that are before you tonight. So we've updated our slides to compare where we've been in terms of tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So next slide, please. First, the economic study findings. So Kevin and Ryan have been very helpful in going through this process. Not only have they given us information about the hotel rooms and meeting space, but early on they were making recommendations of what incentives could we put in our code in order to incentivize more commercial and hotel on the space. Some of their suggestions there were the 85 feet in height. It's a great tool to incentivize a developer from the 75 feet to the 85 feet because they're already putting in a lot of infrastructure into these buildings. And so adding another floor, there's a great savings. Floor area ratio incentives allowing more square footage on the site. So that's where we've included exceptions for different features such as rooftop decks, hotels in general, retail, decreasing parking. So for tier 2 or tier 3 project, we would allow the developer to use a decreased parking requirement. Also allowing for hotels, a couple incentives is to allow the surface parking for hotels because that's typical, and then having more flexible hotel design. So within the objective standards, we've amended that. And the next slide, please. So this slide has a lot to it. The first column is outlining the 3 tiers and what's included in them. And then the second column is what we brought forth for the Planning Commission to consider on December 4th. So at that point, we only had 2 tiers, tier 1 with straight up affordable, with a housing project, and tier 2 being a mixed use with the 85 rooms, 3,500 square feet of meeting space and 4,000 square feet of commercial. During that meeting, what we heard from the Planning Commission, we drafted the code that's before you tonight. We kept the hotels, meeting space, and commercial the same for tier 2. And then within our draft tier 3, we included 100, that should say 25, I'm sorry, I apologize, 125 for the hotel rooms, the meeting space at 5,000 square feet. And we created one option with a hotel rooms, meeting space, and commercial. So that would be 125 room hotel, meeting space, and commercial at 5,000 and 40,000 for commercial, or a 100% commercial development with 200,000 square feet. And so that was just to allow to be able to take in the understanding that the retail demand may not be there now, but in the future, allowing the developer to have the choice to, rather than provide a hotel, to provide 100% commercial building. The third column is the economic study. So here you're seeing the change to the meeting space and commercial for tier 2, where they're suggesting 30 square feet per room. So that would result in tier 2 with 85 rooms, 2,500 square feet of meeting space, and then commercial, they were saying the demand here is somewhere between 25,000 to 35,000 square feet. And then I've also included the numbers for meeting space and commercial, the 3,900 square feet for tier 3, and the same numbers for commercial because the demand stays the same at 25 to 35,000. So we're looking for direction this evening from the Planning Commission on these slides. I would stress to you the tier 2 we're trying to utilize as a tool to ensure a mixed use on the development parcel on the mall. And my suggestion would be to utilize the numbers from the economic study in your tier 2 recommendation to City Council, knowing that that's what our experts have told us. And then with tier 3, knowing this is tier 3, the developer would get an additional 5 dwelling units per acre. That's the incentive there. that asking for a little more meeting space in commercial, that as suggested here, the 3,900. I think this tier 3 is a little more, this is a long-range planning document. It'll be in our code for a long time, and economics change over time. So knowing you have a little more flexibility, and tier 3 being that option for as the economies change. If retail demand were to change, you'd have options there as well. So with that, if you go to the next slide, the CEQA findings, we've put CEQA analysis within the resolutions tonight, but finding that the zoning code amendments are exempt and that the general plan amendments have been analyzed for consistency with CEQA review. Next slide. So this is a busy slide. For the recommendation tonight, we're asking that you adopt 2 resolutions that were in the staff report as attachments. And then we're also suggesting amendments to the code itself, the zoning code. And I've outlined those as A, B, C, and D. A is to add the amendments that were in the memo that I published on February 3rd. The Amendment 2 is to update the change for the publicly accessible open space as referenced by Ben earlier. And then I've drafted C and D for when we do come down to that discussion and a motion, you can either not make any changes and have it as it is today in the draft, or if you want to make amendments, I just tried to make it easy for filling in those blanks. So with that, we can go to any questions that the Planning Commission may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for staff? Any commission questions?
Well, okay, I'll start. The HCD stuff, I found a little bit annoying, somewhat overbearing, and they had a very callous attitude towards the city's finances, saying basically, well, we know that housing is a negative impact on the city's finances, but you guys have to deal with it, and they don't provide any remedies. My real question is, they have proposed in 3 locations that their language, if we don't take their language, and I'm not objecting to it, I think it's actually somewhat repetitive in 2 of the instances to stuff you've already put in our code change, so I don't see why they insisted on it. But in your little diagram of how they can come back to us, I assume that they can get their way eventually, so we might as well just accept their changes tonight.
Well, it still is a policy decision for the city. HCD does have a particular point of view. They are looking to just totally encourage and maximize housing production. So yeah, you're right. They little bit different than the broader perspective that you all might have. But ultimately, the city council is the ultimate arbiter about what the land use policies will be as recommended by you, the Planning Commission. It's important to know HCD's perspective. We do want to work with them, take their feedback into account. Our view is that the language that we put forward and that was in the February 3rd memo from Director Herlihy is responsive to their comments, and they haven't said that is not responsive. They haven't formally responded to that yet. Their direction was before we wrote those additional bits of language. So our hope is that we'll meet back with them and be able to, if you recommend us to incorporate the language that we put forward, that they will agree, and that will be the off-ramp from that flow chart that I proposed. If not, there'll be more conversations. It could escalate, but there'll be other opportunities to weigh. So we wanted you to be informed of that context, but you should make your recommendation with all of that in mind.
Got it, great, thanks, that's helpful.
But my question is regarding the financial impact analysis, the language around that, is that really just to clarify that we're using as an objective standard and we're not using as a constricting standard to housing? It is still a tool for us to use and to rely upon, correct?
Correct. So the intention there is to provide the information to you and the city council so that you can make other informed decisions about what the impacts of future projects will be and how to address those through other land use decisions. What it is not, what the fiscal impact assessment is not, is an opportunity to review a housing development project and reduce its unit count. So I don't like the impact this is going to have on fire services. Can you cut out 100 units? It is not authorizing that type of change to the housing development project. But what it could do is if you see that there is a negative impact due to the way the tax base changes or demands on public services, look to then encourage economic development more aggressively somewhere else to balance it out, or identify other strategies to incentivize. If maybe a hotel hasn't come online yet, we need to ramp up our economic development and incentives to make that come online. And the fiscal impact analysis will help inform your future decisions around that. So it is, the way that we've drafted it and propose it is that it would still be a tool that you can use, but you have to use it in a particular way. You can't use it to say, provide less housing here or don't provide housing here.
Thank you.
Real quick, and in response to both Commissioner Q and Commissioner Estes' questions, it's along the same line. First of all, in regards to the technical review, I want to thank staff and your response and your professional way of dealing with them and keeping a professional relationship. I would encourage you to be proactive in that relationship and keep that going, because unfortunately there are those who will take their opportunities to try to attack the process in lieu of coming to use this public outview. So I appreciate for you what you have done in that process. But back to both the financial impact analysis. One, I completely understand the state's view of we can't use that to deny part of the process, but quite honestly, I think as those in the public that entrusted us to take a look at this stuff, we can, in good faith, make decisions blindly just by going down a path, because the state mandates that we do this. We've been mandated to look at this 1,336 homes in the small town of Capitola, which is adding pretty much a 30% increase in housing and those that will live here. So it's going to be quite an impact to us. So I want to encourage that we do the financial impact. And I'll give you, I'm going to ask you a question. That's what I'm getting to. To do that, to set the point is, what does it cost us per house or per new resident in a new, in this case, we're looking at maybe 1,000 homes. What is the cost per home or per new resident to the city above and beyond our property tax?
So we did an analysis on this back in 2019, and I believe the estimate was somewhere, it was close to $700 per resident. So for cost, and obviously costs have gone up in terms of our budget has increased significantly since 2019. So it would be higher than that original assumption in 2019.
Okay, and I don't know if, Jameis wants to question the study that was done, and I don't blame him. But all that to say that we need to do a study. So if we're looking at adding 1,000 plus homes to the city of Capitola, is that going to cost increased staffing in our city, which would be more cost, or is that included in the $800, $700 per unit? And then also, we're looking at losing hundreds of thousands of square feet of retail that we currently have today, which brings in some sort of money for us. So all that needs to be brought into the thought process, and at least we go into it not blindly, letting the community know, we be completely transparent in this process, knowing that our hands are somewhat tied by the state, and if that's evident by what we saw with the HCD letters and where we're at. But I appreciate you giving us that information. Thank you.
Maybe a question for the consultants, just out of curiosity. A 3,000 square foot meeting space, how many people would that hold? I mean, how many equivalent rooms would that be, so to speak?
Yeah, it's probably about 75 people, maybe up, probably about 75, 50 to 100 people is generally the range I would anticipate that holding. But it's going to be the 3,000 square feet. It'll likely be some kind of divisible space, or not necessarily all in one discrete unit.
Okay, that's a fair number. Okay, and then for you, Ben, you said, I'm not sure you said it correctly, your density, the descriptives on the density calculation, you added 4 things. They're not new, they're just clarifications, right? We're not changing how we calculate density.
We're clarifying what our intent is consistent with the existing zoning code. The mall property is unique, and the way that the housing element describes it is unique as well. So I think we're being true to the intent of the housing element and our expectation all along.
Okay, good. That's what I would have guessed. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff or the consultant?
And if we aren't able to get this done and the developer uses the nuclear option and says we're going to develop with the state mandate, what could they do? How many square feet and how many units could they put on that parcel? You have that at hand?
When you say the state...
You use the density bonus rules and all the tools at their disposal with the new state laws.
Well, there are a lot of tools at developers' disposals, including state density, bonus law, and other pathways. So I don't think I have a specific number for you in terms of the maximum theoretical under these different laws. We do know what would be allowed under our proposed amendments with the maximum density per dwelling units per acre. That's a number that we do know, but in terms of what could be achievable under state density bonus law and others, that's not a calculation we have to share.
The other thing that I heard in your question, Commissioner, and correct me if this is not what you were asking, but if you don't approve the suite of changes or implement the housing element program, what some of the ramifications could be. And that would put us back on that flow chart that I had up before. As Director Hurley said during her portion of the presentation, by April 1st, the city has to report on its housing element progress. If it's not meeting the commitments in its housing element, each CD can continue down that flow chart that we reviewed before, which could include ultimately decertifying the city's housing element. And what that means, if that were to happen, is that the developer would have the ability to use the builder's remedy and bring forward a much larger project with fewer parameters and without the sort of balancing that we're discussing tonight. So there is an incentive to develop a structure that is workable and within the framework so that you still have the opportunity to shape it within the framework and not lose the bit of control that you have left.
And I'd like to add to that even more, because the builder's remedy is something that we're seeing come up across different jurisdictions. And it essentially takes away your zoning, and it allows the developer or the property owner to build to whatever extent they can possibly build to. They don't have to follow rules for height, setbacks. In an area that you have a 50-foot height, they could come in with a 200, 300 plus height of buildings. So there's examples out there in the Bay Area of where builder's remedy applications have come in. They're quite shocking. So it is really important for Capitola, as we're moving through this, to make sure that we, on April 1st, we're in compliance with our housing element, and that we don't get into that place that would leave us vulnerable for a builder's remedy project.
Thank you.
Real quick, do they have to decertify our housing element in order to do builder's remedy? Or can they do builder's remedy because we're not meeting the needs of the developer?
So the builder's remedy only applies if you do not have a state certified housing element. So there would need to be a determination that the city didn't follow through with its programs in the housing element, that it was no longer meeting the housing needs that it had been assigned, and that the housing element was no longer adequate to meet state law. And HCD can go through that process, or an individual or an organization can bring a lawsuit and a judge can make that determination.
So does that bring greater clarity to us that we need to get something done now versus running up against April 1st, whatever the cutoff is?
Yes, that would be our recommendation, is to move this forward so that we can continue to maintain compliance.
So this commission needs to give the recommendation today or the next meeting, or whatever it is, so the city council can do their thing and adopt it.
I'm going to add to that question a little bit as well. So in terms of the recommended action tonight, and one of the items is to move forward with the recommendations we made in our memo, we'd suggest that happening tonight, but you could also hold off on that action and direct us to submit those changes to HCD for further review and see if they're in compliance. But to make the motion to City Council tonight for recommendation, but they could adopt those at their hearing upon further review by HCD. I think it's better to adopt them tonight. We have a draft that we think is that passes muster, but with that, that's up to you.
This is still allowing for continued negotiation if they were to bring a project to the table. I think we mentioned that at prior meetings, but if they wanted to, introduce additional commercial at some point down the line, say the market changed and they had a different approach.
These are minimum commercial standards that we have in, so they could definitely bring a project that brings more hotel rooms, more meeting space, more commercial.
Any additional questions for staff? Okay, so we're going to open up the public comment. Anybody that wishes to speak on this agenda item, feel free to come up. If you can please, in the applicant, thank you.
Not an applicant, but the owner of the property.
Yes.
Good evening, Chair Christensen and commissioners. For the record, my name is Jameis Quilliam with Merlot Geyer Partners. I've spoken off the cuff at prior meetings. I've prepared some remarks I'm going to read tonight just to make sure I don't miss anything. I want to start by thanking staff for the time they've taken to listen to us and incorporate many of our recommendations. We see a lot of positive momentum in this draft and appreciate the collaboration. I also want to say clearly for the public record that we do not have a project application before you tonight. There is no proposed site plan, there's no entitlement request, there's no development proposal being advanced at this stage. Our intent is to engage in this code update process in good faith, because the final code and objective standards will ultimately determine what is feasible and what can actually be delivered. In that spirit, I also want to be clear that we are working in good faith with the city on the affordability approach for the mall, including being open to applying the city's inclusionary framework here that will result in affordable housing being included on site rather than paying an in lieu fee as allowed elsewhere in the city, because we recognize the community's priorities and we want the end result to deliver real housing across income levels. Once the final code updates are approved by City Council, our intention is to move forward with planning and bringing forward at that time a thoughtful redevelopment concept consistent with the community's goals and the city's adopted standards. And since traffic is always a concern, and I'm sure people will bring that up that speak after me, I do want to make one point clear. Any future housing on the site would replace existing commercial entitlements and in commercial buildings. In most cases, that type of land use change results in a major reduction in peak hour trips compared to traditional retail, and it would not be additive on top of the existing commercial that's there today. So you can't think the roads are terrible today, we're going to put tons of housing on top of it. That's not how it works. We're getting rid of some commercial and housing is replacing it, which is a less intensive traffic generator. Also on the Kaiser Marston retail and hotel analysis, we generally agree with the report's conclusions. Their findings that 25,000 to 35,000 square feet is the likely retail demand aligns with what we've recommended in the past. It's slightly higher than the 25 that we originally recommended, but for that reason, we're still a little bit concerned with the 40,000 square foot minimum that's in the tier 2, which exceeds the upper end of their documented market demand. And on the hotel, the report's recommendation of an 85 to 130 key hotel with 2,500 to 3,900 square feet of meeting space aligns with our assumptions as well. So again, thank you for the work to date. We support the direction, and we're committed to being transparent and collaborative and bringing forward something the community can be proud of at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? And then speaking directly into the microphone and then signing in, please.
Signed in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
My name is Katie Guernsey. I sent a letter to the council and to your commission, and I'm going to read it. Thank you. Regarding the Capitola Mall project. Below are comments from residents of Capitola and the greater Santa Cruz area. After the 1988-89 expansion of the mall, which included a food court and a multitude of small businesses with indoor access, the Capitola Mall became a vibrant local community shopping center and gathering place. For young people, the mall is an entertaining and safe place to meet up, shop, and dine. For families with young children, there are many businesses that serve their interests. The Museum of Discovery, the Gymnastics School, and the Giggles and Wiggles indoor playgrounds all offer a fun variety of activities. All community members enjoy strolling and shopping. Since the 1980s, Santa Cruz County Parks and Recreation has offered mall walkers a class that includes stretching and strengthening 3 days a week. Jazzercise massage studios support health and wellness. Friends of the Capitola Library sell an amazing array of books for all. The local artists shop, the gaming stores, and the golf store are also high-interest venues. All ages enjoy socializing, purchasing unique items, and dining with a wide variety of options. We propose that the ground-level businesses be retained and that the housing project be added starting at the second story and above. In summary, we are recommending a broad view of the value and benefits of the Capitola Mall. We are requesting that the master plan preserve the ground level businesses and offer a rich variety of products, services, and experiences benefiting all ages and groups in our community. Thank you for taking the time to consider the thoughts and suggestions of the residents of Capitola and the greater Santa Cruz area.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Alvarez. I represent carpenters in Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Benito County. And we look forward to continue to stay engaged as we move ahead. Projects like this have the potential to do more than just build structures. They can create real opportunities for families through apprenticeship, stable careers, and access to healthcare. Allergies, sorry. As we think about the future, we need to make sure that investment in our community isn't measured only by concrete or siding, but also what we show up on the workers' dinner table, real support, stability, and work opportunities. We appreciate that James is willing to continue the conversation with us, and we'll continue to find a way to work together. Thank you. Have a good night.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dea. I'm here speaking on behalf of Unite Here Local 19, the union that represents hotel, hospitality, and food workers here in Santa Cruz County. It's clear that the main purpose of the zoning code amendments is to accommodate additional housing in alignment with the 2023 to 2031 housing element. However, the proposed zoning code amendments go beyond the goal of encouraging housing development, providing significant benefit to the property owner by facilitating commercial development. The Capitola Mall's current zoning is for regional commercial and requires that the developer seeking a building that is a hotel must obtain a conditional use permit. The current proposed zoning code amendment to allow a hotel as a permitted use has nothing to do with the goal of encouraging housing development. If the goal is to encourage housing, why make hotel use permitted by right when residential use remains conditionally permitted? According to the December 4th agenda report and also mentioned earlier this meeting, revisions were made to the proposed zoning code amendment for, quote, increased flexibility for hotel development in response to comments from the property owner and discussions prior. This, quote, increased flexibility includes removing the conditional use from the property owner or from the requirement, higher allowed FAR, and more than doubling the maximum height. These changes provide a significant benefit to the developer, but deny the city the discretion to impose conditions of approval to ensure responsible hotel development that benefits the community. The city should retain the discretion to consider the impacts of the hotel development on the community and place conditions on hotel developments accordingly. We ask the Planning Commission to amend the current proposal so that the hotel use continues to require conditional use permits, allowing the community, alongside the Planning Commission and City Council, to work towards community-oriented development that Capitola workers and residents deserve. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Ralph Sonnenfeld. I'm here on behalf of Santa Cruz YIMBY. Santa Cruz YIMBY is a pro-housing organization based here in Santa Cruz County. Our mission is to advocate for more homes affordable to people at all income levels. And I'm here tonight. You've seen my face many times. I think this is our fifth meeting or hearing on the Capitola Mall zoning issues. I just wanted to go on the record and say that we were, as an organization, submitted a technical assistance request to HCD and have participated in HCD's process, encouraging the city to take a closer look at some of the specific details in the ordinance that's before you this evening. We also submitted a letter. It's item number 4 in your agenda packet. I hope you've had a chance to review that. To that end, I do want to make a couple highlights from that letter that I think are pertinent. I also want to mention that the Capitola Mall site is really important, not just for the city of Capitola, but for our entire region in terms of housing opportunity. It's the largest single housing site that's currently being considered for housing in the county right now. So it's really important that we get this right to have a feasible housing development on the site. And so to that end, once again, I wanted to express our support for program 1.6 and 1.7 in the housing element. That's increasing the height limits to at least 75 feet. And once again, we're asking that the city include that increased height limit for all sites at the mall, not just the ones in the site inventory of the housing element, but the additional 2 parcels that have been excluded are in fact being reduced in their development capacity for housing by having a 20 unit per acre limit. So we encourage the city to allow housing on all the sites of the mall. I also wanted to mention with regards to HCD's technical guidance, with specifically the conditional use permit, we appreciate the staff's expressed intent with how the conditional use permit process should apply to housing on the mall. But we're still concerned that the language isn't clear enough that the conditional use permit is limited in its effect on the aspects that are outlined in the report. I also would just want to say, again, the mixed use village process has nothing to do with what we've been discussing with the mall, and that should be entirely separate. You haven't had a chance to discuss the mixed use village zoning with regards to the objective standards on the site or in the village. There were a number of objective standards that would apply, including standards such as the parking and
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. We have
anyway,
to
there are 3 units or at least 3 properties that don't seem like they're consistent with those standards now. So I just encourage you to actually have a discussion about what's going on with the village.
Thank you very much.
Hello again, Terry Thomas. Thank you very much for all of the time that you have put into this. I went through the 218 pages worth of stuff in the last few days, and I've come across a few things that I'm concerned about. To me, it looks like a foregone conclusion that the buildings with commercial and residential on the ground floor will be positioned on the main streets. Will there be a maximum building height at the streets? I'm not really clear about the setback requirements for landscaping, sidewalk, and the seating areas in front. It goes from 15 to 20 feet in 14 to 20 feet in different locations. I'm not sure which is the one you're going with. But I wouldn't want to sit on the sidewalk on the street side and be subject to the exhaust emanating from vehicles. And shouldn't tall buildings be positioned closer to the interior, especially if you're talking about allowing a 7-story building on the street plus 10 feet more of mechanical stuff? It's unconscionable to me. I also want to talk about parking. If you reduce the parking requirements, it'll just cause residents to park in the retail reserve spaces, making it harder for people to shop. And a 2-bedroom unit with 1.6 cars allotted doesn't really make sense to me. I also want to say that do not allow affordable units through a land dedication elsewhere on the site. They should be provided by the developer when the mall is rebuilt. We need affordable housing when development commences, not later. And the last thing I want to say is, please do not consider rooftops as open space. I don't want to climb a bunch of stories to get to a rooftop in order to call it open space. I want it to be on the ground level where most people will be hanging out. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Linda Smith, former planning commissioner, so I've been up where you guys are, and I really, really want to tell you how much your work, your attention, your dedication is appreciated by the city. And to staff, we've had these conversations a lot, and I think that one of the things that's very clear to me in looking at all of this is that the approach that we're using as a city is to incentivize the developers to do the things that are going to make the city successful and their development successful. And focusing on that is a very positive move for the city. We have long since held the belief that developers are bad news and they want to take away our little village. But the mall was a huge influx of saving grace, I guess I can say, back when it was built, and it can do that again. I urge you to listen to Katie and the consultants and our attorneys in moving forward so that we do not wind up in the place where builder's remedy can kick in. Look at it from an incentive perspective. Economic development is changing. Retail is different. I went over to Santana Row just this week to see how it's changed, and it's evolving. They've closed a lot of the businesses. It's a lot of outdoor dining and restaurants. There's now two big, there's a Cisco building and a NetApp building at the end of Santana Row that used to be parking lots. And they've incorporated parking in them. It's a very vibrant place. There's live work availability. I'm not sure how much of it's affordable, but it's evident that it's evolving in that direction. So holding out for a lot more retail might not be the smart thing to do at this juncture. Looking forward and having that option is a brilliant idea. So we won't have to do this, every couple of years as things change. But it's a hard decision. Thank you for being here. Thank you for dedicating your time to reviewing all 200 pages and having done it several times.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak on this item? No? Okay, going to close the public hearing and we're going to bring it back to the commission for deliberation. Who would like to start? Anybody?
We might as well jump in and try to figure out the minimum space sizes that Katie's looking to fill in the blanks. And I think when I looked at the consultants' data sets and where we were, we're pretty close. And whether it's 25 or 35 is sort of not a huge deal, I think, to the developers. So I'd propose that we go with a minimum on item C of 2,500 square feet and 30,000, and 3,500 square feet and 30,000 for item D. This is a reference point for where I'm at.
Okay, I'll go ahead and jump in here. Obviously, I think I probably helped push the tier 3 last time. I'm trying to be a little more optimistic about Malone Geyer's abilities in their mall business. They're professionals. They own 175 on the West Coast. And of those that have 20 plus acres, most of them have 200,000 square foot of retail or they're close by. So I'll leave James to make that decision. But here's my thought. I'm totally fine with most of tier 2. We're put in this position a lot by the state and through HCD and this housing element to add more density to Capitola, which is the most dense city in Santa Cruz County. It's actually more dense than the city of Los Angeles. So I think, I feel like I have an obligation to try to protect our community, but also we need to look at how we make it a more vibrant area. And I've totally embraced the whole housing numbers, but I think we need to look at some incentives that maybe can help Capitola. And in saying that, I want to put something forward to the city council. We're just kind of a group that's going to look at the process, do a lot of the study, and make recommendations to the city council and make the final decision. But when I look at this, I think the state and our city council has given Malone Geyer in the housing element process a lot of the tools to work with to be, I think, been, well, they're profitable in the process, at least with the tier two. And I would like to back out a little bit of tier two on some of this to put towards tier three to add some incentives. So we're looking at tier two and tier one. Obviously, you could always just go and build homes. You want to build homes, and I don't know what the bonus density includes, but I know you probably get a minimum of 1,068 homes based on the 48 dwelling units per acre. So, and that would be the same in tier two. I would like to keep the height at 75 feet on tier two. That's what the city council proposed. I think that's a good number for them. I'm fine with your recommendation of reducing maybe a little bit of the square footage there, but for a commercial. But other than the height, I'm pretty happy with the process. I think by giving the floor area ratio of 2.0, excluding parking, the height to 75 feet, reducing the commercial space, we've given them a lot of tools to have a project. But I would like to throw something out there for the city council and maybe for Malone Geyer to look at to at least have it as an option. And maybe it's a pie in the sky, you can call it what you want, but I think we need to give ourselves that opportunity. We listened to the studies, and I think the financial analysis would give us the real numbers, but we're looking at close to $1 million loss to the city just in housing alone. And then we're going to take away retail space, and we're further in a loss. In our discussions, we're looking at maybe $1.5 million, $2 million. Now, one can say that tier two is going to, the hotel is going to bring that back, and we're going to be flush. But quite frankly, we're not in a great position to be flush in the city. We just passed Measure Y. Measure Y is gone with taking care of our employees, which needs to be done. They're nowhere near the higher end of the scale. They're at the median or lower than the rest of our community. So I don't know what happens the year after that or this next year. We do know that the city manager has pointed out in the next 5 years, we're going to continue to go in the deficit. We're currently at a $400,000 deficit from this last year. So it's not looking good for Capitola. I don't think that's James and Malone Geyer's problem, but it's something that I think we need to try to address in this process. So if we look at tier two with 75 feet instead of the 85 feet, and we leave the 85 feet at tier three, and we move we've added a maximum of 53 per dwelling unit acres. That gives them about 100, my calculations could be different, but close to 110 additional market rate units, which would be a benefit to them. I'm okay listening to the report on the retail and the hotel of reducing the hotel rooms, leaving about 125 and the meeting room space down to 3,500. I'm flexible with that. But I did want to throw that, I think the last meeting, maybe there's some, it wasn't clear, but we discussed 100,000 square foot of commercial retail, and I'd like to leave that at tier three with 85 foot height, excuse me, and the 53 dwelling units per acre. I think that's pretty much what I'm going to propose out there. See if there's any discussion.
I'd like to go ahead, because you're going to hear from all of us, and we're throwing around numbers. Is there a way that we could have this up on the screen so we can track it?
One slide back up on the screen that compares all these. It'd be a lot easier to.
I have a feeling we're all going to be putting our input into this. So while that's happening, I just want to thank the community and their comments and their perspectives. It really shows that you do care a lot about Capitola, and also the staff and the consultants' work on not only the report, but just responding professionally to HCD. So on that note, it's been a beautiful couple of days here in Capitola, and every time we have warm weather, everyone comes over to our beaches from over the hill on that. And the last person from the public who made a comment is saying that we do have an opportunity to really, maximize and take advantage of that. And then going over to Santana Row, looking at all these different spots, retail experience is changing. It's been changing for quite a while. And then people going out to these locations are really looking at experience-based, locations, almost like a lifestyle or a destination spot. So we have the opportunity to really curate that, the mall area to go from a traditional retail experience to more experience-based. As people are coming over to Capitola, we are a destination spot that people want to be in. Looking at that from the economic development standpoint and our finances, Commissioner Welsh is very, very accurate in saying our finances are not in the best place. And then we have to to consider how we're going to bring revenue into our city to pay for services and to pay for all the expenses that we have. Having hotel there, it's, we capture 100% of the TOT tax. It's our piggy bank right there that we want to take advantage of. So, looking at the way we're building all this out, I would consider, as one of our major revenue streams. So on that, I would like to propose that for tier 2, right, we have 30,000 square foot minimum, meeting space of 3,000 square foot minimum on there. Initially, when I went into this on our last meeting, we were talking about large numbers, but after hearing the consultant's report, the last thing I want is for us to build something, right, that's not viable, right? We don't want to make it too restrictive and just have a vacant property. So I propose that for tier 2 and tier 3, keep commercial at 40,000 square foot minimum and meeting space for 4,000 square foot minimum. The thinking behind that is in our entire region, we don't have many areas that can really take advantage of hosting those kind of conferences or even meeting spaces that are a little bit bigger. So having that in our region would be quite the opportunity. And then additionally with tier 3, I would like to keep that 200,000 square foot commercial space just as an alternative.
Yeah, can I ask for clarification? The 200,000 as an alternative to the hotel or in addition to the hotel?
As an alternative to like the housing, hotel, and the meeting space and commercial. I'm not trying to be in addition, it's just an alternative, what staff was recommending.
Collecting.
That's why I asked for the spreadsheet right there.
Okay, before we delve into numbers, I would really like to thank the staff and all of our consultants for all the hard work that's gone on in months over this. And also to Malone Geyer, who's actually come to the table and talked to us in an open and an honest way about, how can we make this work as, collectively working together. And I think we're getting close to what is good for the city. I am like the other two commissioners concerned about the finances, and I'm really irritated with the state for not worrying about bankrupting communities with their housing element, but that's politics today, I guess. I think with the objective standards that have been put together, that there is opportunity for Malone to do at this mall what they've done at many others in the state, which is actually very, in my opinion, very good work. And we can argue about these numbers till we're blue in the face. I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference in how we go forward. But I think we do need to push this to city council and get something going so that, we can continue with this whole process of negotiating what this mall is going to look like ultimately, because it's going to take a lot of time. I would agree with on tier 2, meeting space at 3,000 and commercial at 30,000, just as a compromise on those numbers there. And whatever you guys want for tier 3. I think 100% the or statement, I think 200,000 is too much. I think 100,000 is okay, but if you want to keep it at 200,000, that's fine with me. I think they're less likely to do that than to build a bigger hotel. So that's where I stand.
I saw that the bigger hotel was, the consultant Kaiser was saying that it was feasible, 120, right?
Right.
Okay.
And if you'd like, I could clarify why we went to 200,000. We went to 200,000 because that would be not quite the equivalent of a hotel, but in terms of like the tax benefit to the city. So it was really to true up the city of what, knowing that each additional person added is about $765 to be able to account for those costs.
So it wasn't so that we could have a bigger Costco than Santa Cruz.
No. It was really just to make us whole in making sure that there's enough development.
Okay, that makes sense.
And just to clarify, what is our capture for retail, like sales tax versus TOT?
TOT is, I think, right around 13 or 14%, and sales tax is a lot smaller in terms of the overall tax that comes to the city because a large portion of that goes to other resources. So sorry I don't have a slide on that tonight, but it's in terms of development, you almost need to do twice as much square footage of commercial in order to get the same as a hotel.
Thank you.
Do you have anything? Not yet. Well, I'm really appreciative of the consultant study that we received. I think that adds a lot of clarity to what we're looking at and the minimums that we're considering. And I know that the Merlin Guard had produced something from Cosmot before, but it's nice to have comparison studies just broadly. I am in 100% agreement with all three commissioners that have spoken, but I agree with the fact that we have to move forward, that we need to find common ground. It just pains to not to make concessions on commercial into but I think that incentivizing tier 3 would be our best bet at this point. And I would agree that pushing 75 feet for tier 2 would be a good incentive, and then pulling it in a direction for tier 3 is a decent model to rely on. Do you have
I feel like we've kind of gone round and round on this, and I feel like we're rehashing some old territory. So I don't think we should mess with tier 2. Leave it at 85 feet. Let's narrow our scope to the square footage meeting space and commercial space that we need, and give a decision that the city council can deal with. So I think we've been round and round and round. I think the staff and the commission and community has done a great job of getting to this point. And so that's my thinking.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm probably the one that keeps rehashing stuff. And I'm probably going to be diligent about continuing with that. And part of that is I want to give the city council some tools to work with. I think between tier 2 and tier 3, there's really doesn't really help them much. I think if we give them the commercial retail space, and there's got to be, at 75 feet, that doesn't change the amount of housing units that Merlin Guyer can do. It's no big deal to them. It's going to be easier. It costs maybe save them a little money in the process, but we need to look at some incentives to help them have a good project at tier 3. When you look at 100,000 square feet of retail, I don't know. I keep going back because I was there in 2019, but we had TJ Home Goods and Petco. Between TJ Home Goods, Petco, the Chili's, Ulta, we had talked about In-N-Out Burger, Chick-fil-A, whatever you want to put out there. You're almost at 100,000 right there. It's not like it's overwhelming to do. They have the relationships with these organizations. They have these stores in their other malls. Their other malls, like I said, on these 20 plus acres are well over 100,000, 200,000 commercial square feet. I just think if we give the city council, ultimately it's their call, give them some tools. Tier 2, it gives them everything he wants, Merlin Guyer wants at 75 feet, 43 dwelling units per acre, or is it 48? I'm sorry, 48 dwelling units per acre. It gives them everything they want. The only thing about tier 3, it's a bonus for us. It's a pie in the sky. It gives the city council something to work with. And, you know, if they have to work down from there, if, you know, Malone-Geyer comes back and with a project, and this is the part, we're negotiating something we don't even have in front of us, right? And I hate to give away the city of Capitola over something we don't know that's there. So let's throw a tier 3 out there with a little pie in the sky. And the city council wants to change it from 100,000 down to 40,000. Hey, that's their purview to do that, but at least they have the tool to work with. Right now, I feel like we're tying their hands by giving them lowball numbers at tier 3. You might as well just get rid of tier 3 and keep tier 2 and not have anything. So I think tier 3 is just another option for them to negotiate with when a project comes in. And yeah, really, I guess that's about all I can throw at it. It's up to you guys from here.
I can support that. Changing the tier 2 from 85 to 75 and bumping it up to tier 3 to give the city council some more tools to work with, incentivize it.
I don't know this. Does it give them more tools, or do they still have the tool to raise it to when they get this, to go back and say, no, we're at 85, we want 75. They could still do that. So what tools are we really giving them other than?
Well, we're giving them more dwelling units per acre, right? The height is an incentive that they requested. I don't know why we just arbitrarily give it to them when we don't even have a project in front of us. So they could have a great project at 75 feet, 48 dwelling units per acre in your hotel there, and everyone could be happy. But there's some pie in the sky. We give them 53 dwelling units per acre and 85 feet. It gives them, who knows what they're going to come up with. They seem like they pretty much know what they want already. It seems like what I'm hearing, but they're not telling us yet. So they seem pretty set on the 25,000 square foot commercial space, and maybe that's what they end up with, and maybe that's what they negotiate at tier 2. But tier 3 is just a whole new option. It's just a pie in the sky that we can throw Malone-Geyer a few benefits by giving more dwelling units per acre, the 85 feet, and you know it may help Capitola at the end of the day. And it doesn't tie our city council's hands in the decision making.
I agree.
Okay, so let's do one at a time. Tier 2, I hear a proposal that the number on this page is 85 feet. I hear the commissioners want to change that number to 75. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, and then the red blank on the far right next to 2,500, we want that number to be what?
3,000.
3,000 for meeting space, yeah.
Okay, sold, 3,000. And the commercial?
30,000.
30, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
And tier 3 would be keeping the 85, keeping the 135 rooms, meeting space was
4,000.
It's 125, is it? Was that a
125, that
was
was a
one?
mistake.
125 rooms?
Yeah, there was a misprint.
Okay.
For the
That's
hotel room.
kind of what I thought we had originally.
I know, just trying to
Meeting
get 10
spaces,
more.
what?
I mean, unless you guys want to renegotiate that right there. 125. Meeting space was, I think we agreed on 4,000, and then commercial 40,000. Is that workable?
With an alternative to,
And the alternative, the or statement is what, 200,000 still?
I thought,
200,000.
And I was asking for 100,000 commercial.
I'm comfortable with 100 or 200. I mean, 100,000, I just feel like if we're going to make,
Under the or section or under the?
Under the or.
or, yeah. I don't know.
No, I'm saying commercial 100,000.
With 125 rooms, so 100,000 commercial.
Yes,
That's what TJ's saying. That's where I got confused.
that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
So no 40,000.
Yeah, and then if the city council wants to negotiate and change that, that's their purview.
Well, they could still change it, though. If we go in with 40, we recommend.
You're not gonna get them to change it up. It's gotta be something that comes a proposal for them and they negotiate down. Malone-Geyer's not gonna necessarily come to us and say, hey, we wanna give you 200,000 or 150,000. I know you guys said you only want 35. More than likely, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, again, Malone-Geyer is almost irrelevant, right? We don't know whether they're going to do this project
Exactly.
or not. So we got to do it in a context of what retail's going to work.
I don't know if we have to do, I think, and I'm not an economic, he's in the business. You're in the development business. We talk about the shopping, and I appreciate some of our residents come up here and speaking, but Santana Row just added 5 or 6 new businesses in this last few months. They're adding more housing. The mall across the street's doing great. Retail has changed, but it hasn't gone away. I think I talked already about this TJ Home Goods. They went up almost 5% this last year, added a number of new stores throughout the state. That's a heavy, talking about $10,000, $70,000 revenue a day, 10,000 square foot store minimum. If we have those opportunities, they wanted to come here in 2019. Has anybody talked to them since then? I know our city manager hasn't because I asked him, but it doesn't mean it can't happen.
Well, doesn't it though then become evident that if great retail space, the developer would build more? If we say, you got 40, we need 40 just to look our constituents in the mirror and say we're trying to maintain some retail exposure. But if they go down this road of development and say, well, we have a lot of interest, let's build 100,000. It's not stopping them from building the 100. Let them build the 100.
I'm trying to encourage them to make that decision. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to encourage them to say, hey, let's do that. We could do it. We could get TJ Home Goods in here. We can get Petco in here.
If we do that and we alienate any potential developers.
No, you got tier 2.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Not what do you mean sort of? You have tier 2s there. They can go to tier 1. They can just do housing.
Or they could go to tier 4 and do the builder.
All I'm trying to do is a little pie in the sky in tier 3. Give us some tools to work with in the city. Hey, tier 2 is an easy go-to. We all agree to it. We're all there. We're all on board with tier 2. I think that's an easy win for Merlin-Geyer or anybody. But
again, I think the consultants tell you that it's not a retail world like that anymore. It is different. We are not Santana Row. Retail does not operate the same way over in this market that it does in Monterey or Carmel.
I'm giving you my spiel,
right?
And you can, if you guys want to just stick with the lower retail, that's hey, I'm not here to. I'm trying to just present an argument with you that we're tying the hands of the city council at the end of the day. They have tier 2. Tier 3 really isn't much to work with there if you're going to go to tier 3 from tier 2 with the same retail. So,
and I think
argument.
Incentivizing, that's the name of the game. It's just incentivizing, making it. We're not dictating anything. We're actually making it. We're trying to make it state what we want and make it clear what we want by saying you can do this if you give us this. Trying to prescribe negotiation.
300,000
Yes.
square foot of retail.
No, let's be clear though. We're losing 300,000 square feet of failing retail. Right?
Well,
It's
you know,
failing.
that failing retail right now is bringing in close to $500,000 a year. So, call it what you want. I think we could have better retail with a better mall, a newer process, but it's at all at the end of the day comes down, the city council's got to make a decision on a project that's going to come to them. We don't know what that project, it could be tier 1, it could be tier 2, but maybe if there's enough incentive, they say, okay, we can make this work. I could name the malls off to you with they're making it work. So it's not like it doesn't work in the rest of part of the state. But it's a group think here. So I'm just giving you my piece.
Anybody want to
make a proposal?
Yeah.
We're all good with tier 2, right?
Yeah.
We're all good with tier 2.
We're just talking about tier 3 now, right?
A specific element of tier 3.
Correct.
The commercial.
Why did tier 3? Why did tier 3 even come about?
I think because we wanted
you?
we
I guess
add some incentive with the little.
You disincentive. When you put 100,000, that's a disincentive. They're not going to.
But I think I'm leaning toward Commissioner Howard's argument that the consultants, the consultants are. I was quite impressed with their reports. I think they did a thorough job, including using, national data, trying to revise it down to our particular region. We're not Santana Row. We're not.
The way the brokers said that they wanted.
I could tell you, at the company I worked in Palo Alto, we would hire kids out of college with a 4-year degree in mechanical engineering, and they would get paid a hell of a lot of money because they could afford it. We could afford to do it, but we're not. Those kids would make twice as much as they would make in Santa Cruz, honestly.
Oh, I believe it.
And so that's the geography around Santana Row. Santana Row is like Six Sigma way out there in rich land, in my opinion. We're not there. And so the consultants say 25,000 square feet of retail commercial, mostly, it sounds like food establishments, is about the best that we can do in this mall.
I guess the other.
So I would stretch it to 40,000 for tier 3.
That's the incentive.
That's 50% more, roughly.
And the other thing that did cross my mind this week as I looked at this stuff was, if we do this right and we get new housing and quality commercial that goes with this, and a hotel, which I would love to see, the rest of 41st Avenue is going to have a renaissance. You're going to have a lot more shoppers going up and down to New Leaf and all the way down to the new Beck store at the other end. And so I'm optimistic that it would be a game changer for the whole avenue, not just the mall. And so the rest of the retail space up and down 41st become more attractive. At least that would be the hypothesis that I put out there. So I get how you want the 100,000 and attract it. My suggestion for this commission would be to say, 75 feet's fine, tier 2, 3,000, 30,000, and then 4,000, 40,000 on the tier 3, and let the city council go wrestle with that beast.
I don't disagree with that. Are we still offering the or option?
Of 200,000 square feet?
100,000. Yeah, I can work with that.
Yeah, we need the or option.
Okay, so we have a structure of them.
That part.
If you'd like, I can read back what I heard. So filling in the blanks. So the changes would be tier 1, the height would be 75 feet, meeting space 3,000, commercial space 30,000 minimums. Tier 3 height 85 feet, meeting space 4,000, commercial space 40,000, with the 100% commercial at 200,000 square feet. And that's optional.
And the dwelling units per acre changes?
Dwelling units per acre, 48 dwelling units per acre for a tier 2 and 53 dwelling units per acre for a tier 3.
That's great. Sounds good.
Would you, we'll need a motion and we'll need, if you'd like, I can read this all and somebody can make them.
Just real quick, we talked about, when do we talk about the affordable housing component of that?
In the public space component.
Open space.
Yes, or excuse me.
Oh, would you like to, you can discuss that now.
Are we making?
So before you make a motion, those are 2 other items to discuss. We'll update this based on what we heard tonight and then we can talk about the other 2 items.
Who wants to start?
Was item B, the public accessible open space of size. And, I don't know where we were on it, but 3,000 square feet seemed like a more reasonable size. 1,000 is just too small, is the way I looked at it. And 3,000, I think, is being pretty generous for what would be a open space. So I would say minimum of 3,000 square feet.
We could talk about numbers like a lot, and looking at the examples that the consultant left us, I'm looking at that Britannia Arms, like that small patch of that, like you arm to arm, you're done. You can't do anything on there. And even with the Santa Cruz one, 2,500 square feet, I go there all the time, and it's like, yes, it's bigger, but it needs to be programmable for like events. So I think some kind of like standards or expectations of how it can be programmed, right? Versus just being empty like a cement block is very important to establish on there. So I would say at least 3,000.
I agree. I was a frequent visitor as I worked at Santana Row to that Starbucks ice cream section. And I think that showed up as 15,000 feet. And proportionally for there, it was kind of perfect, right? I don't know if the developers can get to a larger size, but it sure made it a very livable space for that community. And so 3,000 is a minimum in my mind of making it.
Absolutely.
Just for clarification, I know that there was a question during public comment about roof deck space being like private to public open space. And I just wanted clarification just to refresh my memory on if the open space applied to both private and public, or how that was appropriate.
Yeah, so these open space requirements are all for publicly accessible open space. So if rooftop space was provided as public open space, it would need to be publicly accessible and available free of charge.
Thank you. So 3,000 square feet is minimums?
Minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah, but most importantly, that it could be programmed. Like,
Yeah.
right.
I know, I think there needs to, I know we don't have an application, but placemaking is just, yeah, active, yeah.
There was one other element that I don't know.
Yes, it was the public space, and what was the other one?
Affordable?
Affordable
With
housing.
affordable housing, we had talked in December about the type of affordable housing and got some feedback from our attorneys on that. I'd like to recommend that we look at or ask if we could look at having the property donated, or how he would do that. The Merlin Geyer project would give the property to an organization that the city oversees that transition of the affordable housing property. I think James had explained before that preference would be to have affordable housing separate from the market rate and other housing. So I think that's fine. I would just like to see if it's going to be a donation that the city is involved in that process. Is that something that's possible?
Isn't that the dedicated
land?
Dedicated property, and there were a bunch of changes made to that clause in this version.
So on this slide, what we did is just to summarize what the changes are. So for both rental and ownership, the in lieu fee is not permitted. And then the affordable units must be provided on site, and it's through a land dedication to the city or a city-approved developer.
I like that.
So we would participate, whether or not we own the land, we would participate in approving the developer on the site.
So we're saying it has to be on their property, on the mall property?
Yes.
Okay. And does it matter where it's on that property?
No. It
Well,
would be on their
I think
property.
it may. I think I had a question about this. So there are two lots Merlin Geyer has that are not, like, part of that Coles property is not identified as in that 48 or 53 dwelling units per acre. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so could they dedicate that, one of those parcels?
They could, yeah. They would have to follow the objective standards and work within the development parameters for that lot. But it sounds like they're not interested in that because of a long-term lease with Kohl's. I don't think Kohl's would allow them to develop housing in front of the building in which they're doing retail. But if they were to shift Kohl's around, that could be developed.
And there's the new draft language around the dedication sets specific parameters. So it's not that the developer could just dedicate any patch of land and say, I've satisfied my affordable housing obligation. It has to be of sufficient size that it could support the proper number of affordable housing units that are required. It would have to have entitlements and infrastructure and a financing plan identified. So there are specific parameters around the donation process to ensure that the property is sufficient to deliver the level of affordability that's required.
And then all the our objective standards would still apply.
That's correct.
Yeah, I actually thought the 7 items you put in the language of relative to dedication was very good. It's very prescriptive, and there's no way you can get out of it doing it the right way, TJ, in my opinion.
Okay, we good?
Okay. Okay, I will attempt to, let's see, we have 2 motions here. I think, I guess we could do the first one probably the easiest, which is we adopt the resolution to City Council regarding the land use element, residential access or action. And that's only, a subset of what we've been talking about tonight. We actually haven't really talked about the land use thing. There was only one minor change that staff had put in there from what we talked about before. So I propose that we adopt that resolution and move that forward to City Council.
Second.
We need a roll call.
Commissioner Estee?
Aye.
Commissioner Howard?
Aye.
Commissioner Welch?
Aye.
Vice Chair Q?
Aye.
Chair Christensen?
Aye. Motion passes. And then the next.
Okay, so the next one, I move that we adopt a resolution regarding amending Municipal Code Title 17 with some of the changes we talked about in our meeting today, particularly in Section 1757, update the publicly accessible minimum land use number to 3,000 square feet. And then, and I'm not sure what section it is, but we have definitions for meeting space, commercial space, building height, dwelling units, et cetera, for tier 2 incentives for a developer and for tier 3 incentives for a developer.
You skipped A. Did you skip A?
Well, I was going to get to A actually at the end.
Sorry.
I'd like to point a clarification on B. The amendment to 1757-050B1 was to update public to publicly accessible.
Right, but isn't that where we define the size of the?
Actually, it's drafted at 3,000, so no change is necessary.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Good. Okay, no change to that. And on tier 3, we do apply the alternate commercial space of 200,000 square feet as an or to what we have written in tier 3.
And I didn't hear it as part of the motion, but did you intend to include the height of 75 feet in tier 2?
75 feet for tier 2, 85 feet for tier 3, yes. And in item A, I think we've discussed that all the changes proposed, we accept the changes proposed by staff on section 1724, 35, and E and F. So that's going to, the way I read that is all of the red with the HCDL edits are what we're going to, move forward tonight, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I think that's appropriate.
I'll second that.
I'd like to clarify the motion, just to make sure. Okay, so there's, for A, accepting the amendments to the in response to HCD. For number 2, accepting the amendment to update public to publicly accessible. For C, the definition of tier 2 to be modified minimum meeting space of 3,000 square feet, minimum commercial space to 30,000 square feet, and a height for tier 2 of 75 feet max. For tier 3, minimum meeting space of 4,000 square feet, minimum commercial space of 40,000 square feet. The alternative is a minimum commercial space of 200,000 square feet. Correct?
The height for tier 3 is 85.
Is 85. Thank you.
We have a first and a second. It was Commissioner Estee and Commissioner
Second.
Q. I think it was, you made the motion.
Made the motion. I don't care who seconded.
Okay, just
Me
making
neither.
sure. And give a roll
I'll
call.
second it.
Commissioner Estee?
Aye.
Commissioner Howard?
Aye.
Commissioner Welch?
Aye.
Vice Chair Q?
Aye.
Chair Christensen?
Aye. Thank you, everybody. That was a lot of meetings, moving through that. I appreciate everybody. Okay, so that takes care of item A in the public hearing. Moving on to the director's report.
Okay, I have a short director's report tonight. I just want to take a moment to thank you all. We've had a lot of meetings on this, and I appreciate all the time you've spent on this and effort. So thank you, and also to our consultant team. Thank you all, including Kaiser Marston and Ryan from Urban Fields on Zoom tonight. So you're greatly appreciated for all of your great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
To the staff, great job.
Yeah,
Thanks for all the question answering and
I know, all the extra meetings.
bearing with us.
Our pleasure.
Okay, and then we are adjourned for item 8, adjournment to next regularly scheduled meeting for the Planning Commission on March 5th at 6 p.m. Thank you, everybody.